Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic for you today. Let's do it. When was the time you had that let's get out of here right now moment? And by doing that, what did you miss? Please remember to like, share, hype, shout out, and subscribe. Stay tuned for more. I went to the zoo with some friends and my girlfriend. There was this huge bird cage, I forgot the word, where you could walk in and see all the little colorful birds. As we were walking, we noticed a dispenser where you could buy some seeds and sugary water to feed the birds. So we did, all fun and games, until my gut told me we had to leave. I took my girlfriend's hand and we made our exit, and 2 minutes later, so did my friends, who were now covered in bird poo. Not me, but my dog. I was having a little after-the-bar party at my apartment that was right next door. Somehow in a drunken shuffle, my friends disappeared and I was left with the dude I didn't know. He was being nice and we were chatting while waiting for the others to come back. I offered him a drink and got one myself as well. I thought he seemed odd, so I was texting my friends to hurry up. But then my sweet, timid, but large dog started barking and growling at this man like I'd never heard before or since. I told the guy to get the fuck out. And when he got irritated, I said, if the dog says you're out, you get out. He tried to argue. I had to shout him out. 10 minutes later, I hit the floor and crawled to the bathroom to puke. I slept for ages. I never puke when I drink, and I never get that drunk. I thought I'd had my drink in my sight the whole night, but I can only assume he slipped me something. My dog was 4 at the time and is now 11. I'm so glad I listened because his instincts definitely saved me from something awful. I was taking the southbound Red in Chicago during the winter time a few years ago, and 3 people wearing balaclavas entered my car, which was already pretty full. 2 were standing in front, 1 exit at the other guy was standing in front of the other. I saw them scan the people in the car in my peripheral vision. Then the guy standing alone looked over at the other 2 and gave the okay nod. I felt like something was about to go down, so I got off at the next stop and walked the rest of the way home. Fortunately, was not stopped by one of those guys when I passed them, probably because other people were in the car. About 10 minutes later, I get a ping from the Citizen app saying something along the lines of robbery shooting at next station. I passed the next station on the walk back and saw tons of cop cars along with an ambulance parked at the entrance. My mom had something like this. It was back in 2003 when I was 12, my sister 10. Mom and Dad were planning on a date night, and they were going to have us kids go stay with our grandma and great-grandma for the night. Mom said she changed her mind last minute, and instead they rescheduled, and we all stayed home. My grandma's house burned down that night, killing my great-grandma and severely injuring grandma and one of my uncles. Had my sister and I been there, we would have likely been in the same room with great-grandma or grandma, and one or both of us would have died. I was at a party and this guy pushed me up against the wall. He swore it was a joke but said, "Nah, I'm out." I'd already had bad vibes off him all night and called my boyfriend. All my friends were at the party and didn't want to leave, and asked him to pick me up because I was drunk. A week later, that guy was arrested for R. I was at an after party purely because my friend wanted to bang one of the dudes. I waited in the living room, first full of people, but dwindling down to eventually just 2 guys and me. Friend has yet to emerge from random hookup's bedroom. It was fine for a bit, and then I caught a glance between the 2, and it was like everything turned slow motion for a second. I literally dragged my friend to the guy's bed, and we got the out. One of those dudes eventually served time for the SA and murder of his girlfriend. Alright guys, the shoutouts continue as always. First of all, I enjoy this topic, so any other topics you want to hear, let us know. You know, I like the conspiracy ones and stuff like that, and medical stuff too. But for today, just as looking at the comments, I have to look over to the side for a second. I'd just like to say hi to Tassin Moksid 2806, Nova Brilliant 4510, and DQuote 9611. Again, thank you guys for your continued support. It means the world to us, and that's the reason why we do what we do. So if you'd like to hear your name or a friend or family member, just let us know in the comment section. Again, I'll check it once or twice, and on the next video, hopefully say hi. All right, guys, have a great day. Take care. Years ago, I was hanging out with a couple friends in the street. We had the idea to go to a certain club during the night. When we finally decided to start walking toward it, I got a strange gut feeling about it that I couldn't really understand or shake off. I told my friends that I wasn't feeling like clubbing that night, but that they could go without me. My friends tried to convince me to go for a bit, but I refused. They gave up. I said that we could go and rather hang out at a friend's house. Later that night, while we were still hanging out, the news reported that there was a shootout at the club, apparently gang-related, and there were bystanders critically wounded by stray bullets. I remember my friends looking at me with this pale look while I was also very moved by this. I had never experienced something of this sort. Neither something like that has repeated. I'm thankful that I listened to the feeling and that my friends decided to go with me somewhere else. Who knows what could have happened? One night I was waiting for the train when 4 guys walked up and I immediately got bad vibes from them. I've been robbed once before on the train, and their demeanor reminded me of the guys who robbed me. Like they were sizing me up and they were excited about it. I stood there for a couple more minutes reading my book and trying to look casual, then walked probably 3 or 4 car lengths down the platform. They stayed where they were but kept looking at me. When the train pulled up, I went to get in the front door of the car, glanced behind me, and saw them running down the platform toward me. I got in the car and made my way to the back doors at the opposite end. A few seconds later, the 4 guys burst through the front doors and started looking around. I slipped out the back doors right as they were closing before the guys spotted me, so I ended up safe on the platform while they were stuck on the train as it pulled away. When they looked out the window and saw me, they looked furious. I booked it out of the station and took the bus instead. The next day, there was a news story that someone was robbed at knife point at the next stop right around that time, by 4 men who fit the description of the men I encountered. I'm so glad I listened to my gut and got out of that situation. In hindsight, it all happened so fast, and it's crazy that I reacted in exactly the right way to get myself to safety. Not me, but my husband. He used to work for a delivery company. He had an unshakable feeling one morning to a point that he couldn't bring himself to go into work. He just kept saying something was off and he was going to trust his gut. The guy who covered his shift delivered to a house where he got attacked by 2 dogs, and dispatch didn't pick up on the fact that his vehicle hadn't moved until 6 hours later. No one knew he was there, and by the time anyone came out to check on the guy, he was too far gone to be able to save. I still think about that. I feel so incredibly bad for the guy and his family. At the same time, I'm beyond grateful my husband didn't go to work that day. It's a double-edged sword, thinking about it from a moral standpoint. My husband quit that company the next day after they sent out a reminder email to the drivers about what happened, and it was very heartlessly was woof woof. Remember to be mindful about our furry customers. They don't always know that we're bringing them good things. I wish I was joking. Not really leave now, but when I was in my final year of high school, I planned to return my books to the library near my school a couple of towns further on Saturday. I told some friends about it, so maybe we could hang out after. The morning of, I really didn't want to go and didn't want to come out of bed, so decided to just go later. At that time, I was an early riser, and this was something I really normally almost never do. Also, I loved going to the library. An hour later, some friends kept trying to call me, and one was even at my door. Apparently, the train I was supposed to take had derailed and several people had died. When I just turned 7, my family and I were visiting extended family in Scotland. It was 1982 and we'd traveled from New Zealand. It was normal then for children to be pretty free-range. I'd gone down the road by myself to the local shops, and I was followed on the way back by a man. He gave off the most malevolent and evil feeling despite doing nothing but walk behind me. I always remembered that so strangely. I ran down the alley behind my aunt and uncle's house to hide because I didn't want to get caught at the front door where I might have to wait for someone to open the door. Years later, I saw an image of a man on an online news site. I think it was around 2010. I recognized that man. It was Peter Tobin, Scottish serial killer and S-offender. He was familiar with the area of Glasgow we'd been staying and has been tied to a pedo ring. I went to sleep for an extra shift I picked up earlier than normal. One of my really good friends really pushed for me to go with him to a party. I couldn't bring myself to have fun instead of getting sleep before a 12-hour shift. Turns out he was planning to murder-suicide us. He wrecked his car into a tree right after leaving the party as his way out of this world. He survived, and his dad found notebooks and poems about how he had planned all this out, and this was his way of us living in the afterlife as bros. We stopped talking after. Yeah. When I was 13, my aunt took me to the beach. It was a little later in the day and pretty empty, just me and her. Not too far out, I saw a sandbar. The water went from knee-deep to suddenly not being able to touch the ground. But I went out further and found a second sandbar where I could touch the ground again. I kept diving under the water to try to feel around for sand dollars, but I noticed a faint buzzing that started getting louder and louder and louder. There were no boats or anything, and I could only hear it when my head was under the water, but it sounded like something big was next to me and super close. It was starting to weird me out, so I looked back at my aunt, who was standing next to two other people, frantically waving at me and screaming, but I couldn't hear what they were saying. I just knew right then and there, don't splash, don't panic, and move slow. I basically tried to keep the pace of just walking back, even when my feet couldn't touch the ground. The buzzing I was hearing turned out to be sharks circling me. Two joggers noticed the fins and told my aunt they weren't dolphins and that they were getting closer to me. My aunt was pissed I took so long getting out, but I told her I felt like it would have been an awful idea to start kicking and splashing, and something was telling me to go as slow as possible. Not me, but my then roommate was a school janitor. He usually left for work before I got up, and I was surprised to see him out in the living room playing Xbox when I knew he had to work that day. Apparently, he just had a terrible feeling that something was going to happen that day and called in sick. I thought he was being an idiot, but when the news hit later that day that there had been a school shooting with multiple casualties, I was stunned. I don't think science has any kind of explanation for that. It's one thing if he was regularly slacking off and something happened on an off day, but I'd never seen him just up and miss work for any reason, never mind just having a bad feeling. Not a leave now moment, but something similar. I was living in my parents' apartment and they were both asleep, both take medication to sleep, so they were out. I was about to go to sleep as well, so I turned my lights off, but something told me to open my door, so I did, and I looked out into the hallway and saw flickering lights on the wall. I thought, that's weird, and almost ignored it, but instead I decided to check it out. Turns out my mom put a candle in a plastic cup on top of an antique dresser. Of course it started a fire. The flames were about 2 feet high and the living room was filled with smoke already. Luckily I was able to put it out and wake my parents to air out the apartment. I think to myself sometimes that if I decided to just go to sleep, me and my parents both would have probably died to a house fire. Always trust your gut. I used to be a altar server for the church the foster family I was with at the time attended. Catholic, real strict, small rural ranching town. The priest that had been there basically forever passed away, and he was well into his 90s. And they went through a few temporary ones before they got one that would stick around longer. He was younger and seemed really interested in the youth of the church, trying to set up youth groups and stuff like that. He got really interested in foster kids, or those living in group homes and whatnot in particular. And since mine was heavily involved with the church, part of how I got roped into being a server, and I was there a lot, he took a lot of notice of me. He kept trying to get me to have private Bible rap sessions with him, whatever that meant, and said he wanted to give me more personal guidance, saying I needed it since I didn't have the support of a biological family and all that. Something he apparently said to other kids in similar situations. By the time I'd honed pretty good instincts for people who were off, and this guy sent all my alarm bells ringing. I tried to be polite when in front of anyone else, but I made it absolutely clear to my foster parents of the time that I would absolutely not tolerate being anywhere near him any more than necessary, and there was no way in hell I was going to be alone with him, and I would get violent if I needed to. They knew I meant it too from previous incidents, so they never tried to force it. Found out many years later after I was an adult, from a furry comedian talk show to the Ranting Griffin, of all places, That the priest, who had skeeved me out so much, had been arrested for the essay at gunpoint of a little boy and actually trying to hire someone to kill it after the kid had told people what happened to him. Apparently the guy he tried to hire to do the job said he couldn't do it but knew someone who could, and he contacted the FBI, who set up a sting with an agent pretending to be someone who was available for hire. And when the priest tried to hire him, he got arrested. The church tried to cover it all up, of course, and I'm pretty sure the church is still there and pretends nothing happened. I don't know what his final sentence was, but whatever it was, I hope he's been torn apart and can never harm anyone again. I just wish he'd never gotten the chance to hurt any kid, and knowing that it wasn't me doesn't really bring me any feeling of relief, because I know I would have made an entire Broadway musical out of it, whether people believe me or not, and at the very least, that might have spared other kids' experiences I'd already dealt with anyway. Maybe I would have even had a chance to go for his throat, who knows. But apparently, my instincts that he was bad news, no matter how friendly and with it he acted, were spot on. I was in my science class writing notes and watching an experiment we were doing. I got a feeling I should move over to a different part of the table, so I did. A couple of minutes later, the part I'd been standing in exploded in flame. The gas tap had been leaking and the gas cloud finally hit the Bunsen burner we had going. Since no one was at that location, it was totally harmless and we just went on with the lesson after the teacher switched off the gas. Our science teacher never trusted our group with an open flame ever again, though. At first I thought I was being weird, overly sensitive. I stopped by this local small grocery store because I needed some milk and mayonnaise but didn't want to go to my regular store that was so much busier and further from my house. This guy kept appearing at the end of the aisle I was in. To say he looked at me in a creepy way would be a bigger understatement than saying the surface of the sun is kind of warm. After 3 times of these looks, I checked out and left. I saw him in the parking lot. He just stood there watching me get in my car. Unfortunately, I didn't learn my lesson so quickly. I went to that store 2 more times when I needed just an item or two. That man was there each time. I was so creeped out by this guy, I stopped going to that store. I thought I was being crazy, but I tell you, the look in that guy's eyes was so scary, like he was devouring me with his eyes or something. Didn't think about that guy until almost a year later when I saw him on TV. He had just been arrested. Turns out his name was Gary Ridgway. He worked on the street I lived on, about 5 blocks down. Gary Ridgway was the Green River Killer. I was close to the front at a music festival 25 years ago. Not only was it my first big music festival, I was there with my schoolmates and no adult presence with us. It was as the band was preparing to go on and start their set. The previous band was still playing on the stage door. That I was starting to feel the crowd was different, and I didn't like it one bit. Sure, there was a bit more shoving and physicality. I'm experienced much worse in an earlier set, though. But there was something else I can't describe, but my head was screaming to get out as quickly as possible. I was only a few rows from the front barricade, so I quickly and loudly asked to go over and out the side, and proceeded to watch the set start from the back of the crowd. Tragically, things got worse as the set progressed, and even though the band paused and attempted to calm the crowd, a teenage girl later died in the hospital after being caught in a crush. Rest in peace, Jess. This was honestly really obvious in hindsight, but I was acting naive and tipsy when I traveled alone, 26 female, in Lisbon after dinner. On my walk to the hospital, a guy stopped me and said I looked really familiar, asking me where I was from, etc. I was in a great mood, so we got to chatting. I noticed another guy with his hood up in the background, pacing back and forth, and I made eye contact with him. He quickly looked away, but was lingering, and I realized, oh, I'm about to get robbed. So I politely called the conversation short, and went on my merry way. Not leaving now, but more in the sense of just knowing it's a disaster. My mom suffered from uncontrollably high blood pressure since I could remember. Last couple of years it got really bad, like 270 over 120 bad. Anyways, one night I woke up. I thought I heard a thud, but wasn't sure. Everything was dark and silent, and I just turned around and tried to go back to sleep, but something didn't let me. I got a bad feeling and got up. hallway was empty, and I went to the bathroom at the end of it, which was pitch dark. I turned the lights on in the bathroom and saw my mom on the floor. She was conscious, and I remember asking her why she didn't use the lights. In my half-asleep state, I thought she'd just stumbled in the dark. She said she didn't want to risk waking me up. She was thoughtful like that. She got up and went back to bed. I asked her if I should call an ambulance. I called them often the last year. She said, yeah, I should. Anyway, she had a massive heart attack and passed half an hour later, while I was waiting for the emergency, who took their sweet time to arrive. I keep thinking for a long time after that if I had just went back to sleep like I wanted to, I would have found her on that cold tile floor in the morning. This way she could tell me what she felt was important, and I'll never forget her words. You know, when death comes knocking on your door, your gut knows. Sitting in an otherwise empty living room at a house party after most of the other guests had left and everyone else is upstairs. Two guys, one was the host, whom I hadn't met before, and the other was his friend, and the older brother of one of my high school friends who clearly didn't know who I was, came over and sat on either side of me. Chatting and being friendly, the host is offering me weed. At the time, I was in a couple of bands, and so as the host started telling me about his recording studio in the basement, offering to show it to me. I tell him maybe later on, but he's very persistent, and so is his friend. I suddenly feel very uncomfortable with the whole encounter. Tell them I need to use the washroom and bolt upstairs to find my other friends, who coincidentally tell me they're ready to head out, so I go with them. The two guys see me as I'm heading out the door and ask, "Are you leaving?" And I just tell them, yeah, sorry, and take off, leaving them disappointed and confused. At the time, I felt like I was just being paranoid weirdo, but weeks later I found out from my ex that the host of this party is a known creep who preys on young women, offering them drugs and inviting them to tour his studio, then assaulting and R-ing them and getting them alone. One of my friends was having issues with her roommate who was unstable and nitpicky. I always thought she was just kind of loud and didn't do chores and was generally a bad roommate but didn't expect much else. We were hanging and her roommate came home and was just kind of silently smoldering. Usually she would be loud and nitpicky, but she just wasn't. She walked by the room where we were playing some games and just stared at us for a bit before walking away. I immediately felt super uneasy about it and told my friend that we should go out somewhere and give her space. She said she was too tired and was just going to take a nap. I told her that she should lock her door if she's going to do that, and she did as I was leaving. Later that night I got a text that her roommate were fighting and she had to call the cops. She stopped texting after that. I found out the next day that she had tried to break up their fight and got stabbed to death. I still can't believe I didn't push her harder to leave with me when I felt the vibe was off. She didn't deserve to die. Early 20s, was leaving the community college campus I was attending when I noticed a middle-aged, very plump woman walking up to me. She asked if I was leaving campus, to which I responded yes. She then went into a story of how she was at the hospital across the street and was released, but doesn't have money for a taxi and asked if I would give her a ride. I quickly said yes. I felt bad for her. It was in the 90s and really hot that day. I've never given a stranger a ride before up until that point, but I didn't feel threatened or uncomfortable by her and honestly thought I was just doing a good deed until we were walking to my car and she started to ask me if I worked and if I was married. Whatever, small talk. Then we get to my car and she notices one of my children's car seats. She asked me where my kids are. My body instantly tenses up for some reason and it was weird. And I don't know why, but I responded that they were at daycare. And she asks who pays for daycare. My body at this point is tingling and I ignore it. I tell her my partner at the time paid for it. We get into my car. Now I had two small door hatchbacks, a Hyundai Accent. And this woman struggled to get in. She was pretty plump. And this will be important later. She finally gets in and we start driving. I ask her where she needs to go and she gives me the street name. It's not far away, but it is in a pretty shitty area of town. I oblige and start that way. This whole time my body is going off like alarm bells inside my head. I keep side-eyeing her, wondering if she's going to pull a knife out or something. Stupidly, I never thought about that before letting her in my car. She kills my overthinking by throwing me off when we're halfway there and asks, "I don't have AC at home. Can I go to your house?" Well, I instantly say that I'm not heading to my house, that I have other things to do. So I sit there quietly for the rest of the drive. Meanwhile, my body is experiencing what I assume is confusion on fight or flight or fawn because I have no idea what to do right now. I pull onto her road, and she has me pull into an alley. I pull over and she opens the passenger door and puts one foot out and acts like she's struggling to get out. She keeps looking ahead of us though, which makes me look up. I see two men dressed in dark clothes on this sweltering ass day and I freeze. I understood at that moment what was going on. She wasn't getting out of my car because these two men were on their way over to us. This bitch was not getting out of my car, and there was no way I could physically push this bigger woman out. At this point, my body takes over. Fight mode kicks in and I just hit the gas. She rolls out of the car because I kind of jerked the wheel to topple her ass out and I take off. I truly don't know what was going to happen in that moment, but I wasn't about to hang around and find out. I still find myself helping strangers out, even with rides, but I've never explained or experienced that feeling since, and I would definitely listen to it next time.